wouldn't like to have it, would you?
No. What would I do with it?
Why, give it back to me, of course. Point first.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I was just kidding. Don't let it bother you. I don't blame you for not wanting it. It's a pretty ugly thing. Especially with what's engraved on the blade. Oh, sure, I know what it says. I had one of our interpreters translate it for me right after I got it. It says, "The sword will avenge me."
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pwn, a podcast that discusses each and every episode of the Twilight Zone. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host, Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
I'm good. I feel kind of sorry for our listeners. They just missed a real hell of a book chat. We just got into the Divergent series and
Sinclair Lewis
exactly.
and every point in between.
Yeah, exactly. Did you have a Twilight Zone-y week at all?
No, our baby did crawl into another dimension for a little bit. We called over our plumber friend, got her right out. But other than that, no.
Do you think one day your child will listen to these podcasts?
I hope that our relationship is strong enough that she doesn't have to.
Okay.
She'll have more meaningful ways to connect with me, but you never know.
You never know. All right, cool. Well, what are we talking about this week?
This week we will be discussing The Encounter. This is a 5th season episode. It was the 151st of the production run, right near the end. It aired originally on May 1st, 1964.
Two men alone in an attic. A young Japanese American and a seasoned veteran of yesterday's war. It's 20-odd years since Pearl Harbor. But two ancient opponents are moving into position for a battle in an attic, crammed with skeletons, souvenirs, mementos, old uniforms, and rusted medals. Ghosts from the dim reaches of the past that will lead us into the Twilight Zone.
The emphasis was just a little off there on that. It's like he didn't hit the right syllable. He's just said, into the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have been into the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, he's kind of embarrassed. I don't know.
It's like, let's just get past this episode as quickly as possible.
Come on,
folks.
guys. And we'll be taking a similar tact. We like to write our own Serling-style intros. I don't know who's first.
I think you're up. I don't know if it matters.
Between men of all races, religions, and genders, there exists a fundamental bond. Though it can be strained by the ravages of politics and war, it must not be broken. Petty squabbles, like who created internment camps for who, should be set aside. And if it is difficult for those who fought so bitterly against each other in war to come together as brothers in peace, remember that nothing heals old wounds like a dusty attic, 600 beers, a magic samurai sword, and respectful treatment of each other's proud cultures. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the Twilight Zone.
Okay, I'm going to need a little background here to help me out for this one. Starring George Takei, a hypochondriac, a fuss budget. Neater than neat, cleaner than clean. No wonder his dad was a traitor. Neville Brand, another guy whose wife left him. And his pad looks like she left it a long time ago. Plus he's really racist. George Takei and Neville Brand will try and share all possible delights of a bachelor attic. They're bringing together to all America the laughter and thought-provoking in-your-face racial commentary of Neil Serling's smash hit, The Odd Twilight Zone.
Nice. Did you really need the music for that, John?
Well, it was a little ambiguous with big. I figured I really got to hit it this time.
Understood. Cool. Well, this is a 5th season episode. It's available for your streaming pleasure. I use the term loosely. On Netflix, Hulu, and you could probably find it illegally as well as legally if you buy the DVDs and Blu-rays, which we recommend you do. So this is a much requested episode by our listener base, and I can't help but notice that our listeners
they're being jerks.
Yeah, they just want to put us into uncomfortable situations. It's like this and Death's Head Revisited are our two most desired.
It's all the one person who was calling us twitchy.
Yeah,
just trying to get our twitchometers off the charts.
Yeah, John and Fred really offer the hot take on racial attitudes of the early 60s. So we open with a dude, I think he's already sweating at this point, and he's cleaning out his dusty old attic, and he finds a number of dusty Japan-related things, including a samurai sword, which seems to surprise him, and he throws it into a corner.
Leonardo's been sniffing around up there again.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Nice little Ninja Turtles ref.
We're having fun, Fred. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be a blast.
It's good that we're doing this episode, Fred.
Yeah, it's a very good thing.
Did you notice when he's taking a drink, I think, you can kind of see his belly button outline in his shirt. You notice that? It's a detail you don't always notice in a man's shirt, but
yeah.
The old belly button shadow.
Was it an innie or an outie situation?
I believe we're innie. I mean, it was a deep shadow. It wasn't pushing out.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like a cold weather situation where an outie was coming out.
Right. So, what? I'm kind of lost in this joke. I'm not sure what's most inappropriate about it.
You're like, I just want to hurry on to the racist stuff now. Yeah. I don't even know what's happening.
Yeah. Anyway, so he hears a voice calling out, and he waddles over with his pot belly and cavernous belly button to look down the stairs. And hot or not, did you think the guy looked a little bit like George Takei? Hey-o! Ring-a-ding!
Ring-a-ding!
It is George Takei, and he's at the bottom of the stairs. He's a gardener, but for some reason he's wearing a pith helmet. Is he like a gardener spelunker? Or?
I think it's like, HG reality extreme gardening show, He's like really, really gardening.
Maybe like there's the subtext of this episode is actually set in like Jakarta or something, and he has to like hack through jungles.
Well, the weird thing is it's actually a stunning indictment of World War II, but it's all about the North African campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Most people don't pick that up.
Very, very subtle. They set up like a little deal, but Beer Belly wants naturally to share a beer with George Takei, so he invites him up. Gotta say, having a beer with a sweaty guy cleaning out his attic, it's like never a solid move. I just like instinctively know I don't want to be in that situation. But I guess to like lock down the gardening deal, George Takei agrees to split a Michelob with him.
When you're a small businessman, you've got to do whatever it takes to impress the client.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we first started the podcast, we went to a lot of dirty old attics, shared a lot of beers with a lot of racist listeners.
Who kept requesting this episode.
They'd love it. It's their favorite. Anyway, so they get to racial politics pretty damn quick.
What'd you say your name is, boy?
Arthur Takamori.
Arthur?
That's right.
Well, that's funny.
What is?
Well, why Arthur?
Why not? I was born in this country.
Sure, I didn't mean anything.
I'm as just as much American as anybody.
Well, now, who said you're not? You're too darn sensitive.
Yeah, I guess I am. Truth is, my name is Taro. I changed it.
A rose is a rose. Get what I mean?
Shakespeare quoting racist.
Yeah.
Just some small talk. Clean out the attic, have a few beers, and insult each other.
Casually call each other boy.
Yeah, exactly. That was horrible. So, racist Beer Belly starts talking about how he was in Okinawa, obviously in World War II. And he starts showing George Takei the samurai sword from before, which he kind of vaguely hints is mystical in some way, kind of casually. He's just like, yeah, it keeps appearing. I don't believe it's mystical, but it's magic. I don't know.
Well, I believe before he shows him that, he lets him see his medals, or as he refers to it as...
Yeah, check my fruit salad. Crazy, huh?
Again, a sweaty racist in an attic saying, check my fruit salad.
And a Chris Rock bit was born.
Yeah, that's when you want to get out of there.
But he's not done with the colorful things. When he hands over the sword, he also has a colorful moniker.
Say, where'd I leave that pig sticker?
What?
You know, the sword.
I feel like it's less clear what he said the second time.
What do you mean?
First time he says pig sticker. The second time he's like, sword.
Yeah. Jay, baby. He has a sort of drunken slur, or not slur, sort of slurry way of talking.
Can I give you an audio hot or not?
Yeah.
I think he sounds a lot like the dad from Gremlins, Hoyt Axton.
Yeah, I know that actor because he's a singer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he has that kind of like...
The inventor of the best room buddy.
Yeah,
he's got kind of that twangy, kind of thick, gravelly.
Kind of like a thick, gravelly good old boy.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of sounds a little bit like Roger Miller, actually. Like the, chug-a-lug guy, It's like a good genre of voice, because it can be sort of spun for like I'm going to tell you some country tales, friend. And then it can also be like, sweaty racist vibe.
Yeah, you can play the whole range from buffoon to drunk.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of potential there. Racist Beer Belly shows George Takei this pig sticker.
Which is kind of a callback to hobgoblins in a weird way.
Is it?
Pig, stick.
Oh, yeah, right. 99 hand, fish, kicker.
Tickler.
Yeah.
Sorry, listeners.
Yeah,
We'll move on.
exactly. We normally save obscure Mystery Science references for the end of the podcast.
After most people have already left.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, he goes off into some corner to hide his Playboys, and George Takei is looking at the samurai sword, and he starts saying, kind of in this sort of reverential whisper, I'm going to kill him. Or I guess it's like, I'm going to kill him, Captain. Or it's hard to get into full. Oh my.
I'm going to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. And I was sort of confused the first time I saw it. He's not reading the inscription on the sword, right?
No.
Okay, because
not at all.
That would be a funny inscription for a sword. I'm going to kill him.
I just thought it was really poor, weird, sloppy writing. It just felt really, really forced to have the character say that when you wanted to convey what he was thinking. Like,
yeah.
Could he have just looked at the sword and then given the guy like a nasty look? But
Yeah.
he's supposed to feel conflicted inside. Just have him record an inner monologue. It seems so weird to have him say it.
Yeah, it's odd, but I think they just needed to end the cold open on like a dramatic note, I think, and oftentimes dramatic equals unsubtle.
Right.
So I don't know. But with that, we get Serling's intro. He's over in the corner covered in cobwebs. And then we cut back and some more playful racial banter gets tossed around. In as much as this episode is kind of clumsy and insensitive in dealing with race, they handle it kind of cleverly, because what happens over and over again is that the racist guy is like, here, boy, have a beer. And then, quite rightly, George Takei is upset by that. And then the racist guy is like, hey, relax, I'm just messing around. Which, kind of puts him on the wrong foot. I feel like that's the way it happens in real life when people are kind of offensive,
Make the other person feel defensive, like they're being a little too oversensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, put the onus on the other person.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a more realistic...
Yeah, that's a great tactic.
Well,
that's what I tried to do.
Right. No, but I do think it's like a more realistic depiction, because oftentimes in TV shows, racism is just like so overt, and it's just like, you're Japanese and I don't like that. And I think that like this is a more... I mean, I hesitate to use the word subtle, but I do think it's a more true depiction of what racism is like in real everyday life. Anyway, the sword goes missing, which ratchets up the tension. Beer Belly reveals then that he knows what was written on the sword. Earlier, he kind of played dumb about it. And apparently on the sword is the inscription, "The sword will avenge me," which is kind of like a defeatist inscription to get inscribed on a sword, if you think about it. It presumes the bearer of the sword will die.
Well, we'll all die one day, but
I know, but if you just died of like
the sword is going to cure tuberculosis or something.
Just imagine the sword in a lab coat, just like working really hard. Some beakers.
The sword's just like getting behind Michelle Obama's weight loss regimen after you die of type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, exactly. Photo op on the cover of People magazine with Michelle with her arm around the sword. That'd be awesome.
Sword's just jogging across America, raising awareness.
Jared and the sword. Anyway.
Oh, all right.
We have fun. And then we get this little sequence where a racist starts wandering through the attic, and he turns on his CD of jungle noise ambiance, and he starts kind of like slipping into this trance of telling George Takei this story about how he was in Okinawa creeping through the jungle. And George Takei gets out this sword, and clearly this like magic trance is coming over them. And they start fighting and struggling. But then the spell of this moment is broken. And they somehow get back to light banter, which is like a pretty advanced social move,
Yeah. And here's the little snippet of that.
You used that sword like you were mowing a lawn.
I couldn't tell. That's not a compliment, right?
Yeah, I think that's a pwn.
Or is that a compliment? I think that was a slam. Like, instead of wielding it artfully, he was just kind of slashing and hacking around with it.
But it would be hard to mow a lawn with a sword. I've tried.
I know, and if he's a landscape man who's skilled with, like, a lawnmower, then maybe it fits. I think that was an insult.
Yeah.
I'm like 80% sure that was an insult. He's like so good at backhanded insults, even the audience can't tell at some point.
Yeah, George Takei's like, thank thank you. They managed to downgrade from knife fighting to sharing a brew. George Takei finally comes to his senses and tries to leave, but oh my, the door is locked, and Races can't get it open either.
Looks like you're not supposed to leave just yet.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I don't know what I mean.
Up there with some of the best goes to commercial. I feel like a lot of characters in the 5th season wanted that line of dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
I don't know what I mean. I'm just saying words. I don't know why.
Yeah, looks like someone doesn't want you to leave. Like the writer of this episode.
Yep.
Yeah. Who needs to present an obstacle that's kind of illogical.
We do get a pretty badass line from Takei when he's kind of, I believe, rebuffing Beer Belly, and he says something like, I got a short fuse, or I got a short fuse, so don't light matches, or something like that. It was a very Patrick Swayze line coming out of George Takei.
Yeah, it was
I bet he
Roadhouse.
cut that into his reel.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's like I'm a match ready to go, so don't place me near heated. I don't know. It was more concise than that.
Yeah, it was basically that.
Yeah.
It was basically that.
Exactly.
It's like, I'm a mixture of turpentines and oily rags, so if you leave a space heater next to me, you're in for trouble.
Yeah. It took a while to round it out, but yeah. So George Takei is telling the story about how his father built the docks on Pearl Harbor and how they were there for the attack, and he goes into a little poetry slam.
But I stood and I watched the planes. While down below at the harbor, my father was trying to warn the sailors, trying to tell the men on the ships what was happening. But the bombers came anyway, and I could hear the boom, 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 boom as the bombs exploded. And I could see the smoke. And my mother was crying. And my father was yelling to warn the sailors, yelling for them to fire back. Boom, boom, boom. Planes circled overhead. They dropped their bombs.
If that sounded weird and intense, it's even weirder and intenser in the actual episode.
Have we already used up our reference to Freddie Prinze Jr. and She's All That when he's doing the hacky sack monologue? Because that's definitely calls back memories of that.
Yeah, certainly. But after that little poetry slam is done, it turns out that it was all BS, and George Takei's dad was actually a traitor and apparently signaled the Japanese ships that bombed Pearl Harbor, which is a pretty big thing. I mean, it's also not historically accurate, but if someone just dropped that nugget in convo, like, we'd probably talk about that a little bit more. But the racist changes the conversation pretty quickly with the offer of a beer.
I feel like this is like a beer commercial writ large.
It kind of is, though, because
no problem is too big. Yeah. It can't be smoothed over with a cold one.
Are you familiar with the concept of like a French plot or a French scene?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's like a dramatic situation in which the entire plot takes place in one room and the scenes are changed by a new character coming in or a character leaving or some event that like introduces a change. And in this, like, in certain Twilight Zone episodes, they do that with like, new music cues or whatever. But in this, it's just like a beer. A beer is what changes like one beat to the next. So the beer segues nicely as the racist goes on a long and racist and potentially sexist tangent when the topic turns to his wife.
I guess I drink too much.
You think?
Arthur, you're a pretty nice Joe. I knew that right away when I first saw you. That's why I asked you up to have a beer. So I can tell you, man to man, it's been pretty rough lately. They canned me for my job. Put somebody else on the cat. Can you imagine? Just because I had a few lousy drinks one day. No, it wasn't the booze. That was just an excuse. It's all that cheap labor they're bringing over here. Yeah, they're letting them in from everywhere. Mexico, Puerto Rico, China, Japan, foreigners. We make Hawaii a state, and look what we get. I'm getting off the subject.
Enjoy our talk on American History X right after this.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun combo.
Yeah, it's funny because this convo goes on from that. He starts talking about his wife.
Yeah. You'd think he'd be a little bit more progressive in his treatment of women.
Yes, you'd
with
think.
What's come before.
Everything is leading towards that, but surprise, surprise. It's just... At a certain point, he's saying, like, oh, but my wife will be back. I'm the one who's bringing home the bacon. All women are prostitutes. You just have to go to the Orient to figure that out. He's like some sort of weird, like, improv comedian. You can just, like, toss him any subject, and he'll figure out a way to make it racist.
So they're like, what are you having for dinner? Steaks. Well, you know how steaks are.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all after our women.
Yeah, he really just can find any subject and make it racist. Anyway, the magic samurai sword takes over George Takei again, and the magic beer takes over the racist. And there's yet another racist rant, no worse than the one before, but apparently that's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And they start fighting. And in the struggle, Beer Belly falls on the samurai sword and dies.
Did it look kind of like Beer Belly got stabbed in the butt from the like weird blocking and framing of the whole thing?
I know. It seemed pretty clear to me, but maybe I was just watching it with a slightly more mature eye than you were.
Oh my.
At this point, with Beer Belly dead, there's only one thing left, but for George Takei to scream bonsai and jump out the window?
Well, you know, Fred, we've only watched about half the episodes at this point.
Yeah.
And we've seen like 4 that feature a character jumping through a window inexplicably. Maybe this is like a huge Twilight Zone trope we just haven't really fully awakened to yet.
Yeah. Maybe in Eye of the Beholder, when like the pig face is revealed, she just runs out the window.
Right.
It was a cookbook.
Yeah, this I found
it was a
funny.
window.
Again, it makes it seem like we have some sort of coherent plan.
Yeah.
Where we did 2 jockey-related or horse racing-related episodes in a row. Now we happen to do 2 jumping through window ending episodes in a row. But
yeah, it's just something about it too. This is one of my favorite jumping out the windows. Maybe my favorite one was Persons or Persons Unknown when the guy jumps out the window. But
certainly, well, you never forget your first.
Yeah, exactly. But something about him shouting bonsai and just taking like a huge run across the room, it's just so insane. And then Serling takes us out. But I might add that underneath this monologue, we get a slow pan over to the door, which they were unable to get open, which slowly opens as Serling says the following.
2 men in an attic, locked in mortal embrace. Their common bond and their common enemy, guilt. A disease all too prevalent amongst men, both in and out of the Twilight Zone.
To start at the beginning, what happened in that episode? I mean, what exactly was what was the Twilight Zone-y element of that episode?
Well, I think that's the big elephant in the room of this episode. Is in my book, the only explicit fantastical part of this episode is the fact that the door inexplicably locks and then it, magically drifts open at the end. I don't know, we maybe can kind of debate about to the extent that the sword or, the atmosphere kind of overcomes them, but I got the impression that this episode was kind of written by a guy who had some things to say about race and maybe just had to shoehorn it into a Twilight Zone, so they did the door thing, which just ended up seeming even more contrived.
See, why would they throw in that red herring? It's got to be the samurai sword that's causing all of this, because at the beginning the guy's so disgusted by it, and later on he's like, I keep trying to give it away, but it keeps showing up. And it's when George Takei is looking at it, he's like, I'm going to kill him. I don't know why, Captain.
I agree that maybe there were efforts to put that in. I still think that this feels like some guy's idea for a Playhouse 90 type show that's just like a straight drama of 2 characters kind of dealing with racial conflict, and they like maybe shopped it around to some other things and couldn't get it. They're like, oh, well, maybe if the sword's magic, it'll work.
Yeah.
And like made it worse for every way.
I hear you, but I think that like the fact that they like slip into this kind of like trance-like state where they inexplicably start actually fighting and then are able to cool down again and then get right back into it, something about that is kind of magical. Although you could just say that that's weak writing. I don't know.
Granted, I often totally miss the point of these things, as I do.
Well, you're not missing the point. Like, clearly, I agree with you.
I think I did just think, like, all the fight parts were just so kind of contrived, and the, like, hearing Sulu's inner monologue, having him just say it out loud, and then fighting and then just chatting for a bit, like, it all felt so contrived. It was hard to really glom on to that as like a real driver of the story of the like mystical sword. It was just like, it just stunk of like crappy writing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You know, the Twilight Zone, one of the reasons Serling wanted to even do it was because you could tackle serious subjects under like a cloak of fantasy, and like in the best situations it's, you know, kind of subtle or an interesting metaphor. The fantasy is woven with the real life issue in a clever way. But in this one, it's like the fantasy is like glue that holds together a crappy, sort of clumsy take on a real issue.
Right. It feels like fantasy here, instead of being like woven into the fabric of the episode, it's just kind of like taped on so it can air on this particular show.
Yeah, and also just like an excuse for explaining the awkward thing of like, why are they fighting? Racist beer belly, who presumably has a name, but I forget what it is.
Fenton.
Nice little name. You could say that he's sort of like suffering from PTSD in some form. A couple people on YouTube made that comment. And I think that, like, you know, that character of like someone who was trained to fight in a war and trained to hate Japanese people and coming back to America and having a, you know, a hard time of it. That character, though despicable and loathsome, is like a type that we've come to understand and is sort of like, that's kind of an interesting character. And I think that it's weird, but like George Takei's character is kind of nonsensical to me. The idea of like a Japanese person in Pearl Harbor signaling the planes didn't happen, you know what I mean? Like that was not a historical fact. It's not something that happened. So his guilt, especially because it was his father who did it, it seems vague to me.
I do find the idea of sins of the father a little, I don't know. Personally, it's a little weird to me, but I guess I can take a step out and think if my dad had been responsible for like 9/11 or something, right. Like I'm sure I guess I wouldn't feel personal guilt, but I also wouldn't really want to, I wouldn't want people, I would feel shame. I guess that's the difference between shame and guilt. Like one person. Yeah.
And well, but it's like Serling kind of makes an equivalency at the end. He's like, they're both suffering from guilt. And it's like, well, I mean, kind of like it's a not exactly. I mean, George Takei's character is a lot more blameless, and I think that's like rightfully so. But is the takeaway supposed to be that like we're both at fault? It's like you'd want like an actual Japanese person as opposed to a Japanese American, someone who is potentially complicit in being on the Axis side. But you know, they don't do that, and it just creates this weird false equivalency. And at the end I'm like, wait, did they not know that this guy's horribly racist and that George Takei's blameless in this episode?
Do you really think that they're setting them up as like moral equivalents?
Well, at the end Serling is like two men locked in an endless cycle of guilt, and it's like,
which is kind of weird because they're not. It's like stuck in a mortal embrace. It's like, no, Sulu killed him and went flying out the window to go avenge some more people. Like,
no, Sulu's probably committing suicide.
You think?
Yeah, because they're really high up. Remember he says that? I think Sulu is committing suicide.
At first I thought he killed himself, and then I thought, well, he seems so confident.
He was confident. Did you really think he was just like jumping out to go commit more murders?
Fred, how many people go through windows in the Twilight Zone? You never know what's going on.
True. That is true. I think he was committing suicide.
Until I see a photograph of the ground or a slot machine rolling up to it, laughing over the body. Yeah. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, understood.
This episode obviously had a fair amount of controversy. It's one of the few episodes that didn't get included in the syndication package, so it didn't air over and over the years. I don't think it's 100% certain, but you know, the pretty obvious reason is because there was a lot of prickly racial tension related to this episode.
Yeah.
And online they suggested a big problem being the mere suggestion that like an Asian American person could have been a traitor involved in Pearl Harbor. I know that never happened, but is it tone deaf to like not have a problem with that, knowing that it's like just fictional?
I think that like that would be a really big deal. I mean, first of all, there's the issue of Japanese internment, you know, during World War II. Sure. So I think like it's not like the United States government has like, you know, a clean bill of
I guess
health
it's already
covering that.
It's like kicking them even harder when it's like we were really we really screwed up with the Japanese American part of it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think that like
to like pretend like that one of, or even fictionalize that they could be blamed.
Yeah,
that someone could be blamed is pretty rough.
Yeah, it almost reads as like some weird like justification,
reverse validation.
For internment. And I also think that like the concept of an American citizen helping out during Pearl Harbor, I think would just be such a, because it was obviously like 9/11 to people at the time. It would be such a big thing that like I think it's just too sensitive and too huge of an idea. I mean, I think even if like in 24 they don't talk about like, oh, an American helped the hijackers on September 11th. I think that's like
I could see them doing like some fictional terrorist event and having like a white person behind it. But yeah, to actually have it be, if there was some dramatic work that was dealing with September 11th and posited that an American was behind it all, that would be probably pretty scandalous.
Yeah,
in the day.
But I think it's interesting because like the episode, it's not on the side of the racist guy, but I do think that the issue is that it does create a bit of a false equivalency, and that's what's offensive about it, and the historical thing too.
Would you say the episode is on Takei's side, or do you think it's just kind of like trying to be more documentary and more not making a judgment on either of them?
I don't know. I mean, it certainly is judging against the racist guy, and it's hard for me to understand exactly what Takei did wrong because you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I wish it had...
You got to jump through a lot of windows.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I mean, I definitely, like, this episode is a little cringy. I do think it's like a common thing in the 60s where you kind of sense that the writer was trying to like tackle race and war and things in a sort of sensitive way, but just kind of like did it clumsily and ended up kind of being, if not outright offensive, just straight up insensitive. You know what I mean? And that's the real issue, maybe? I don't know. We're definitely getting far afield of our mandate here. So we play the jingle?
Right. Let's get back to where we're safe. Jingles.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Scott, Zickery, Mark Grams Jr., Zickery and Grams, and IMDb.
One bit of interesting trivia from the Twilight Zone companion. Mark Scott Zickery discusses how the director apparently did not want to direct this episode. He felt he didn't know how to handle the material, and the writer offered to direct it, but apparently the producer shot him down because they would have still had to pay the director, and Serling would have been mad about them wasting money.
I'm glad those decisions were made for the right reasons.
So I think that, leads into potentially a problem with this episode. Maybe there was a way to direct this in a way that it would have rang a little better.
I don't know.
Come on, I don't know. I think I look at this and think mainly the writing is the problem.
Yeah.
But then I wonder when you've got a director who's like, I don't get this material. That seems like a warning flag.
That's a bit of a red flag. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's my trivia.
The Martin Grams book goes into more discussion about the episode not airing again. Some people say it's banned. I don't think that's actually true. I think more just that they chose not to re-up it for syndication, which is, I guess, slightly different than actually being outright banned.
Yeah, well, it's voluntary versus forcible.
There's a couple goof moments, which I actually noticed when I was watching it, where the characters drink the beers, but they're not really drinking, and then they have it turned upside down. So if you watch closely, you can sort of see the tab. And there's plenty of beer drinking, so there's plenty of opportunities to see that. So here's the director, apparently the guy who didn't understand the material. Some people thought that it was racist, recalled director Robert Butler to author Mark Phillips. The American versus the Japanese theme could have been too volatile. It wasn't your typical TV. It's a very harsh show. I'm sure it was considered too hot to handle. It's raw conflict, and it gave both the actors and myself a terrific opportunity. We didn't have to spend time on any production logistics. We spent time on developing the theme, the characters, and the drama. For me, it conveyed a tragic circumstance. How unfortunate that these two people should meet in peacetime and rekindle that same volatility. Each of the individuals is a fine person, but the fates have thrown them together. I'm not really sure if racist was a fine person, but I think like that. I think that's
that maybe speaks to the director not quite grasping the material.
I think maybe the point of it, from his perspective, was that, like, history has thrown these two individuals together unfairly, but it's like, not everyone in history is a racist, you know? I don't know. Anyway, that's about all the trivia I got.
Neville Brand played Fenton.
Mm-hmm.
He is regularly cited as the 4th most decorated soldier in World War II.
Whoa.
But according to the internet, that information is incorrect and was denied by Brand before his death. He was, however, according to official military records, the recipient of the Silver Star for Gallantry in Combat, the Purple Heart, the Good Conduct Medal, American Defensive Service Ribbon, quite a few other ribbons and badges.
Got quite a fruit salad there.
He was extremely highly decorated, though perhaps not the 4th most.
I was going to say I feel real kinship with him, the 4th most popular soldier in World War II, but it's a little bit inappropriate.
Somewhat different.
All right, yeah.
He thrice played Al Capone, and
got a good low, menacing voice for it.
He was quoted as saying, "With this kisser, I knew early in the game I wasn't going to make the world forget Clark Gable."
Got it.
He was a lifetime heavy.
Yeah, he did it well.
George Takei played Arthur Takamori, or Taro. Along with Robert Duncan McNeil and Robert Picardo, he is one of only 3 Star Trek regulars to wear all 3 uniform colors. He wore a blue medical science uniform in the 2nd Star Trek pilot, Star Trek Where No Man Has Gone Before, the gold command uniform in every subsequent episode of the series in which he appeared, and the red security uniform in Star Trek Mirror Mirror. Did you know that, Fred? Be honest.
Is that little Fred pleasing there? I did not know that, no. Although I know who Robert Picardo is. I'm actually kind of surprised by that. I can't think of... He was the doctor on... Let's just move on.
I just figured it was kind of funny that his name was Picardo.
Right,
Did he inspire
Jean-Luc Picard? No, I don't think so, but
okay. George Takei his father was actually a huge Anglophile, and he was named after King George VI of the UK.
Huh.
And I found this really interesting. In George Takei's personal life, the actor who played Chekhov from Star Trek was the best man at his wedding.
Walter Koenig.
So, I found that cute to know that they were
buds.
Such lifelong pals, because I've heard a lot of... I wouldn't say William and Shatner and him are enemies, but I think William Shatner is just kind of a brash personality that maybe isn't Takei's cup of tea. So
I'm not sure William Shatner is friends with too many people from the cast of Star Trek. One thing that's kind of funny is that in recent years, George Takei has kind of become like a weird arbiter of memes. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? It's just kind of like he's like a kingmaker of the meme world.
So, those are the only 2 actors in this episode. Another small cast.
Any MST3Ks?
Unfortunately, no. There's no official ones. I mean, George Takei was obviously in the Star Trek movies, which have been covered by the MST3K spin-off brand Riff Tracks. They've done several of them. But
they also like to imitate him, so I feel like... Should I keep talking like
Honorary.
George Takei, Captain?
Written by Martin M. Goldsmith. He also did What's in the Box, and directed by Robert Butler.
Martin M. Goldsmith kind of had a weird raw sensibility, you know? Well, actually, there's another character falling out of a window. When I say raw, I just mean people fly out windows.
Yeah, I mean, that was like his signature.
Yeah.
He was the Chayefsky of throwing people out the window.
Yeah, exactly.
Robert Butler also directed the episode Caesar and Me.
Oh, that's a real winner.
Yeah, and he also directed the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, a very early, what's his name? Kurt Russell vehicle.
Cool.
Yeah, like teenage Kurt Russell. All right, so IMDb gives this episode a 7.4.
Kind of in the middle.
Better than its rep, probably.
Yeah.
Better than what you'd maybe expect.
Yeah. I mean, I think the performances are actually very good. Like, in as much as you can do anything with these characters that are sort of weirdly written, I think they both give, maybe Takei takes a little bit over the top in his poetry slam, but they both do a good job conveying, an intensity. And I do think that, on some level, the writer's heart was kind of vaguely in the right place, in the sense that it's he wanted to talk about the tragedy of war on the individual, but kind of missed the shot. So, I don't know. It's below a 5, but maybe not a 1. How do you feel?
Well, it's not a 5 per se, because it's memorable. And the performances are good. I think it's just the writing that kills this one. I think I feel like there's some universe where this episode could have been better, where there could have been an interesting comment on race relations that was more coherent and maybe had a fantasy element that actually
made sense.
Made sense in the context of what they were trying to say. It's like the pieces there. Like when the guy had this idea, you can kind of see what he was shooting for. It just didn't get there. So I don't know. I don't think of it as terrible, and I'm not sure. To me, it doesn't read as like.
I just like the ending is so bad, like, and so weird. Like, to me, it's got to be below a 5. But I mean, to me, it's a 4. I would say 4 is how I feel.
Some weird part of me almost likes it, but I'm thinking like a 4+.
All right.
All right, 4+.
4 and 4+.
So thank you to multiple people who requested that, including Kristaps on Twitter, Chris on Gmail, and Vile Jelly on Tumblr.
Thanks to all the people who want to make us squirm. Thanks to all our passive-aggressive listeners. So what are we going to do next week?
Next week we're gonna take a soft slow pitch right down the middle.
Softball.
We're gonna do The Mirror, which was requested by Ace Copywolf on Tumblr.
Well, that one actually is also potentially twitchy because it involves a slightly racist portrayal of a Cuban.
But it's so dumb.
Okay.
Can't we just have fun?
Okay. All right, we'll give it a shot. So before we get to how to get in touch with us, I wanted to share a little listener feedback and.
I hate to tell you, but I'm afraid this time you pulled a boner.
Yes, it seems we made a mistake. Via Tumblr, a listener named Down the Staircase mentioned, "Hi, I finally got around to listening to your Midnight Sun podcast, and I am so glad that you commented on the score. It's my favorite score of all the episodes. But you said the main melody line was played by a clarinet, and just FYI, it's actually an alto flute. Not trying to be snobby or overly corrective or anything, but as a clarinet player, I can definitely tell you it's not a clarinet. Keep being awesome." It is extremely specific, but I actually really like that because I like kind of nerding out on the score. And I just got a book that's all about the scores of the Twilight Zone, and I can confirm, indeed, Down the Staircase is correct. It is a flute. It's a bass flute and not a clarinet. So as the resident music expert, I eat a healthy serving of humble pie on that one.
Well, can we just be clear, though? He said it was an alto flute.
True, or she.
You're telling me it's a bass, or she said, you're saying it's a bass flute. So we can all just agree that we all made mistakes.
Yes, exactly. The difference between a clarinet and a flute is basically the same difference between a bass and an alto flute.
It's not the same instrument. That's all I'm hearing.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
hearing we all got the instrument wrong. Maybe you said...
I said it was played on an electric guitar. They got the
maybe
slightly
you thought
wrong
xylophone
woodwind.
with accordion accompaniment and whatever.
They got the wrong flute. Hey, we all made mistakes.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'll be nerding out more about score stuff now that I have this book. But before we get there, please tell us mistakes we made and other things by writing to us, and how can people do that?
You could send us an email at twilightpwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You can check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com, where Fred is going crazy with some emoji quizzes you'll want to check out.
Please do.
And you could listen to us on Stitcher or TuneIn Radio, or you could subscribe to us on iTunes. And while you're there, if you'd like to leave us a review, we would really appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody who's left reviews. We really appreciate it. I don't have a good question because I couldn't think of one that wasn't racially charged. So
yeah. So Fred, for the question, are you racist?
Yeah. Did you kill a man in Okinawa? All right. I think that's it. I'll talk to you next week, John.
All right. Talk to you later, Fred.
Bye. John, do you have the boner clip?
Uh-oh. I'm on alert. Okay. Got it out.
So before we get to how to get in touch with us, I want to share a listener feedback. Wait, sorry, let me set...
Oh, sorry, are you cueing me to say
I
it?
was, but hold on, let me do that again. There's so much energy to get the boner ready. So
you're a star, Fred. You're a big shining star.